Council Nelly Herrera. Chancellor McCall, you can lead off. Not that that's a gift, but I appreciate all of you being here and being patient through the hearing and for what our members consider to be a very helpful discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, my name is Brian McCall. I'm Chancellor of the Texas State University System. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss where we are in the process of complying with Senate Bill 17. Texas State University System, the oldest university system in Texas, the third largest, comprises 7 institutions spread across the state, 700 miles difference in one of our components to another. We're organically diverse and serve every type student from all over Texas. Under the direction of our Board of Regents, our system and member institutions began working more than a year ago to address the legislature's concerns and work on our compliance with Senate Bill 17. In March of 23, I directed our institutional presidents to eliminate the use of diversity statements in the hiring processes and to review and modify any campus policies related to hiring that were not consistent with state and federal law. Since the passage of Senate Bill 17, we've adopted a comprehensive multi-tiered strategy to achieve legal compliance as of the bill's effective date and have put systems in place ensuring ongoing compliance in the current year and beyond. For example, job postings are now reviewed by each institution human resources department to ensure that jobs do not include any prohibited functions. Additionally, mandatory student and employee training now requires the review and approval of high-level administrators to make certain that we do not run afoul of the statutes. We've also created an online portal where employees, students, members of the public can confidentially report potential violations of Senate Bill 17, and that may not have been detected through the audit process. Our board has been actively and directly engaged in discussions with our audit and legal teams, as well as our system and institutional leadership to ensure compliance. In short, we've done everything that you've heard other systems are doing throughout this day. Our regents receive regular updates on the progress, and we're committed to full compliance. To give you just a bit more detail, in terms of scale, we're a $1.6 billion annual organization that spent less than $3 million annually on DEI. For the most of the time that I've been at Texas State University System, we have had no DEI offices. Even when we had them, the majority of our institutions did not have DEI offices. We had a total out of 15,000 employees, 20 employees working directly in DEI total. And so what does that mean? How have we been able to do various things relative to representing people that look like Texas on our campuses? Since I became chancellor, not because of me, but in the time frame that I've been able to measure, our total headcount is up 27%. Minority headcount is up 103%. African American headcount up 50%. Hispanic up 130%. Over the past year, with DEI in effect, our minority headcount up 5%, African American up 4%, Hispanic up 5%. Degrees awarded, even though the number of students is up 27% in that same time frame, degrees awarded is up 47%, but for minorities up 158%, African American up 130%, Hispanic up 171%. Faculty, since 2010, total faculty up 31%, minority up 127%.
Right on time.
I'm very obedient.
I have questions and compliments on your testimony just now, but I'll reserve them until we finish up. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman Creighton, members of the subcommittee. My name is Michael Williams, and I serve as Chancellor of the University of North Texas System. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you today. I'd first like to provide additional context regarding our compliance with Senate Bill 17. I want to assure this committee that the University of North Texas System and our institutions are fully committed to complying with all laws and regulations, and Senate Bill 17 is certainly no exception. After the legislative session ended, we began reviewing policies, programs, and practices to ensure we were in compliance in advance of January 1. The Office of General Counsel provided guidance to all UNT system institutions and employees to facilitate and ensure compliance with Senate Bill 17. In addition, a thorough review of functions across UNT system institutions was undertaken to identify and eliminate any office, division, or unit that could meet the definition of a DEI office. We reviewed over 200 training programs from the system and the campuses.
Chancellor, if you could move a little closer to the microphone. Yes, sir.
There you go.
We reviewed over 200 training programs from the system and campuses, and any training that referenced DEI was removed and is no longer available for participation. UNT System is a values-based organization that conducts merit-based hiring, and no modification of practices or procedures was necessary to comply with Senate Bill 17. However, the UNT System Human Resources Department reviewed and continues to review job postings and job descriptions to comply with these requirements. In March of 2023, I also issued a directive prohibiting any job posting from requesting, requiring, or using DEI statements in any hiring decision. Our internal audit team is developing an audit plan to provide audits of the compliance programs and processes to identify strengths and ensure continued compliance. While these changes were not always simple, we were fully committed to complying with the law. At UNT, the Division of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, known as the acronym IDEA, was eliminated in October of 2023. That resulted in a total of 17 individuals. We'll talk about personnel in a minute for more clarity for you. The UNT Health Science Center, the UNT Dallas campus, and the UNT System Administration did not have any similar divisions or offices, just on our flagship. We implemented these changes while maintaining a welcoming learning environment that provides opportunities and support for all of our students. As it relates to our culture, this is important to me because one of my highest priorities since becoming chancellor was to begin developing a new culture that was built around fostering a people-first, values-based culture that puts students and their families first. We've developed a new system vision and 5 key core values that guide our work every day. And I want to highlight just 2 of these core values to address the question of where does this go in the future. The first is we care, which means our system champions a people-first approach to building relationships and community. The second value I want to emphasize is better together, which fosters an environment of respect, belonging, and access for all through awareness, understanding of different experiences, and respect for differences of people, beliefs, thoughts, and ideas. As we live these values and behaviors, they permeate our system, our decisions, our policies, and our actions. In our system, we recognize the benefits of a student body that reflects the state's population. UNT now enrolls 47,000 students and is designated as both a minority-serving and Hispanic-serving institution. UNT Health Science Center provides health education opportunities and delivers health care to underserved populations throughout Texas. UNT Dallas has an 85% minority and 70% first generation and works with a mission to empower students, transform lives, and strengthen communities. In short, the UNT system will continue to prioritize our values, our students, and our people while ensuring we follow the law. In closing, I want to make a few brief comments about the unique responsibility we have as public institutions. Our purpose is to provide high-quality higher education opportunities for all Texas students. We're deeply committed to our students, their families, and our communities. Access to and success in higher ed is critical to the economic workforce needs of our state, and higher education changes the trajectory of students' lives who in turn then change communities. That is the value of higher ed and what drives us in doing everything that we do. We're committed to working with you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Members, questions? Yes, Senator West.
Chancellor Brand McCall, thank you very much for your system's response to my questions. Thank you very much also. I don't have any questions of you because you guys responded to the questions that I asked, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Chancellor, I wanted to thank you for your testimony as well. I appreciate the letters that were provided as well. Texas State System did a great job on your submittals. The committee is very appreciative of it. Chancellor, you mentioned that the UNT system has always focused on merit-based hiring. In your letter that there's an auditing process and a compliance report that will be an annual report based on you refer to Section 51-3525 compliance requirements, right? That's just what you do every year, right?
That's right.
On compliance, and that could be provided to the committee.
Yes, sir.
The mandatory training requirement prohibitions, the diversity statements that we've talked about, that some universities were requiring of professors that were applying, all of these things down the list. Appreciate your efforts on all the above. Chancellor McCall, thank you for your testimony and those outstanding numbers on performance, right, of just not relying on DEI offices. So your testimony is that compliance wasn't difficult because there wasn't a ton of work to do, correct?
No, compliance was difficult
Compliance was difficult, okay.
because we want to make sure we're doing what you want, and it's a big organization with a lot of different players.
Many moving parts.
Yes, sir.
Right? So, and I appreciate the clarification. I mean, there's really never an easy task about complying with bills that have broad language, right? It's just making sure that there's no tripwires, and that continued effort for compliance for the system is something that at the end of the day, as a former member of the legislature, I mean, we're working in our best practices possible to make sure that if we put enforcement in a bill, or the public has an expectation that we're on it, because we've also been in situations where we haven't paid much attention to legislation after it's passed and hit the governor's desk, and then there's been our papers are graded over exactly that. So that's just incredibly important. But the numbers you quoted and cited on the increases in diversity in your student population, and I believe you mentioned minority faculty recruitment and hiring as well,
Correct.
right? Without a huge footprint for DEI, you're accomplishing incredible diverse outcomes in your goals, as well as both systems focusing on merit for hiring. And so it seems like to me, based on your testimony, there's harmony between the two on the efforts, hiring based on merit and also achieving diverse outcomes. Your student population is 80% minority, right?
Well, at one campus, but by us, as a system, we're very diverse.
Yes.
That's true.
Right. And I appreciate the distinction you're making and clarification. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I
yes,
may, I
go
would
ahead,
add
Chancellor.
one more thing. It was in a question I heard you ask earlier, or make a comment on, and I just want to reiterate it because it was a key part of what I want to get across, which is the importance of culture, and culture around one that's based on a set of values that we live by, and a set of behaviors that define the community, how we live in the UNT system community.
Right.
And then that drives how we look at character and how we also hire, in addition to competency.
Correct. And that culture means everything. And leadership at the top, it's incredibly difficult, as you know, as our chancellors would attest to, and I know General Counsel as well, to understand and be able to convey to the committee that there's full compliance on anything in a system as large as what you're managing. but the culture in all leadership positions, and a lot of times it has to sometimes organically happen from the bottom up as well, down to every single faculty member understanding the bill, that some aspects of DEI was weaponized against other marginal, vulnerable populations on campus and those applying, and that there is a perspective where you can seek out and hire based on merit and increase diverse outcomes in all categories, right? And it just, that was the case before DEI became prevalent, and it needs to be the case now post-DEI, post-Senate Bill 17 passage. So for, for the two of you, what would be some of the more difficult aspects of that audit process and continued review to make sure it's not relaunched, renamed, or reauthorized as we head to January into session, as opposed to the feeling or the sentiment that we got that box checked and we're done? How do you continue to review knowing that you can't see every email, you can't really monitor every training process or the mindset of every person with the system that's in charge of hiring?
Do you want to take that?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Nellie Herrera, and I'm the Vice Chancellor and General Counsel for the Texas State University System. And that is an excellent question, because that is the question we have been asking ourselves throughout this process. We understand that compliance is important. That's the initial compliance, but that doesn't end there. It's sustained compliance. We have to be able to have processes in place to support sustained compliance. And that is where we've had to become creative in how are we going to monitor this, and how are we going to be able to continue the process throughout, because people come and go. People who are here now and may be well versed now with Senate Bill 17 because they've heard so many sessions about it, well, they may be going on to other positions. We have new people coming in. So there's a certain amount of education that has to continue. There's a certain amount of commitment that every institution must have to this process. And I'm very pleased to be able to say that the 7 member institutions of our system are completely committed to ensuring that compliance continues.
And so, just as a follow-up, would it be the system itself performing the audit and the compliance review process, or the individual members within the system reporting on that?
For our system, it is our internal auditors that are a part of the system office that is conducting the system. And that system, right now, we have all hands on deck. In other words, our auditors are completely engaged in this process. We have a wonderful group of auditors. Our chief auditor is excellent here. She and I are working hand in glove as to how we continue this process. So for our system, it has been at the system level. They are conducting the audits for all of our campuses.
Right, and the same.
I'll make one quick comment, Chairman, if I may, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Stuckey. And that one it's like a quote I heard not too long ago, that you can have the absolute best goals, but unless you have really strong systems underpinning them, you won't achieve those goals. I think we have to build meaningful systems that are repetitive and are understandable and repeatable and persistent, and in a way that are measurable. And then those will withstand the changes in personnel over time, and that's a process actually we're looking at across the system in other areas, or strengthening our system. So I'll stop there.
Alan Stuckey, Vice Chancellor and General Counsel for University of North Texas System. I agree with everything that Ms. Herrera said. At our system, the Office of General Counsel led the charge for implementing SB 17. In the past month, we have begun the process of transferring that over to compliance, so that long-term, this becomes a compliance project and a compliance goal to stay in effect. We stay very closely aligned with compliance function, and the internal audit function is looking at all of the processes we put in place all of the processes that compliance is putting in place to make sure that those processes are adequate and sustainable.
So as you proceed on through the next few months, Chancellor McCall mentioned that, and others have mentioned, turnover in academia. You know, it's with the influx of new applicants and teaching faculty coming in to the institution. I guess those systems that you mentioned, Chancellor, are so important because you can set expectations at any certain date, time certain. But month after month after month, as change continues to happen within the university system itself, it's important to have the systems and supports in place to be able to truly comply.
Absolutely, it's all part of this same culture piece too. As we construct a new culture, it's having systems that are connected back, like hiring systems where we turn policies tied to termination or promotion, all those kinds of things are all parts of building those underpinning systems. And those systems have to go through variation as time changes, new bills get passed, and new leadership changes. But by and large, they stay the same, or stays very, very consistent anyway. And just to reiterate one thing, and it's probably the same with Texas State, I'm not sure, but compliance is a campus-based, ground-level operation, whereas audit is a system level. So it's really the combination of the two working together with legal as to how we get that done.
And so in your memo submitted to the committee, Chancellor, you mentioned that there was really no modification required for merit-based hiring categories because the practices and procedures that were in place prior to SB 17. So there were never any required diversity oaths or during the application process, sort of a culling of resumes, if not pledging to a certain sort of ideology or what have you. You always had merit as the top requirement for hiring.
That's correct. And my comments earlier about the systems of hiring being altered in any way tie back to what I said earlier around values and culture and higher values-based hiring. So.
Didn't have mandatory pronoun training on campus and for faculty, and yeah, got it. And Chancellor, for the Texas State system, I know I represented the Lamars, and now Senator Nichols has I have Lamar Port Arthur, right? So we've kind of combined there. But at one time, like many of the universities across the state, there were separate graduation ceremonies for the Lamars. And is that still the case post Senate Bill 17, or have we united everybody in graduation?
No, they're individual institutions. So we had 14 graduation ceremonies last week. So each of the Lamars, the graduation ceremonies are separate because they're separate institutions with separate presidents.
But I'm talking about separate subset graduation ceremonies where certain students are separated at one, member institution from others.
Yes,
So.
Texas State, for example, had 7 graduation ceremonies last week.
Mm-hmm.
We have about 60 graduation ceremonies every year. And it's a function of geography and real estate and size. Because we have so many first-generation students, it's not unusual to have 20 to 25 family members come celebrate that first college graduate making it through the pipeline. It's transformative. When we get them through the pipeline, they will marry a college graduate, their kids will be college graduates. It changes the family dynamic and the state.
So the University of Texas and Lamar, they both had what they called lavender ceremonies, where LGBTQ graduates were separated off from the rest of the graduating population. And University of Texas ceased those separate, segregated graduation ceremonies and united everybody and brought them back together in one ceremony. I was just wondering if that had been done in the Texas State system at the Lamars in particular, or probably just part of the audit process going forward is reviewing all of that in sequence.
This is news to me.
Mm-hmm.
I am aware that we had a separate baseball ceremony for the baseball graduates at Texas State.
Got it.
And your former colleague, Dawn Buckingham's son, Dalton,
Yes.
graduated on the baseball field this last week, rather than in the ceremony with everyone else. So
Got it.
I do know that that sort of thing does happen. I'm not aware of the example you gave.
And
Don't
it's-
dispute it, but I'm
it-
not aware of it.
It's just an example of what falls into the category for all institutions of just compliance in general. And then some of these decisions, like what UT made, go beyond the scope of the bill, and just making decisions based on efficiencies and duplicative nature of overlap in different categories. And I wanted to redirect to both both of you that are here as general counsel. My prior question that I asked the previous panel about the intersection between public information that's requested and what is, privileged work product based on advising your client as a member of the university system or a academic department, the English department, whatever department it might be. What is your opinion, each of you, if you could help the committee understand better on that intersection of shining a bright light, which is very important, on allowing the public to see what their tax dollars are funding versus reporting that something is just not discoverable?
Absolutely.
Depends.
I'm sorry.
Of course, I knew you were going to come with that. All right, good lawyer always says it depends, right?
I was going to say, I actually agree with my two colleagues who were at the panel before. What they said was spot on. Actually, what happens oftentimes is when these open records requests come in, immediately they'll be looked at to see if we can turn it over. Whatever is coming in, it's discoverable. We understand that. The sunshine laws are so important to the state, and we absolutely accept our responsibility under those sunshine laws. And so when it comes in, it is with an eye towards, can we go ahead and disclose? Because that's going to be the first and foremost issue. After that, then if it is an issue that involves any type of privilege, like the attorney-client privilege, that will be something that will be reviewed by the General Counsel's office. But to your point earlier, when you asked the other panel, well, whose decision is it at the end of the day? It depends on who is asking the question, too, and who the responder is. Because if it is a question that's being asked of the President's office or the Chancellor's office or at the Board of Regents, then that's where decisions are going to be made at those levels. The Office of General Counsel is there to guide, but we're not there to make decisions about whether or not something is going to be disclosed or not. We will be there to provide guidance to our client. We will be there to give them the information as it pertains to the law. But at the end of the day, decisions are being made at the levels that are going to be responding to the open records request.
I think it's important to remember that we as general counsel do not have the authority to waive the privilege. That authority lies with the presidents and the chancellor and the board. So when there is a question that comes up, we go to the presidents and the chancellor or the board as appropriate to make that decision about whether that should be disclosed or not. And then ultimately, if the privilege is going to be asserted, that has to go to the Attorney General's office for a final ruling. So we don't have the authority to just hold things. And also...
So there's not an example of when the privilege is invoked, there's not an example of where it would be held from the Attorney General's review. It would proceed to the Attorney General's review in every circumstance where the decision was made to revoke the privilege, to invoke the privilege.
That is correct.
Yeah, got it.
And it's important to note that the privilege does not privilege facts. Facts are always disclosable.
That's right. Well, it's important for the committee to understand, for the public to understand when we're in a compliance mode or mindset. Having you as general counsel before the committee is valuable to us, just to tell us where you're coming from in that regard. Yeah. Members, any other questions? Or Senator West?
I want to go back to DEI for a few minutes. Here's just a broad question for both of you. we're working for equality. If the loss of DEI initiatives create an equal playing field, that's great if they create an equal playing field. But if for some reason, if the loss of DEI initiatives don't create an equal playing field, the question is, what do we do? What do you do as the academic leaders of your respective institutions? Do you come back to the legislature with your biennial reports and say this is not working and make recommendations, or what do you do?
The best way to predict the future is to look at the past. And in our unique university system, with or without a DEI office, we have been able to make our campuses look like Texas, make our faculty look like Texas. In the year since DEI was discontinued, system-wide, African-American enrollment is up 5%, Hispanic enrollment up 5%. So is that enough? We don't know, but we're going in the right direction. We want to keep going in the right direction. When you were out of the room, I don't know if you heard, but for most of my time at Texas State System, we've not had a DEI office. And what DEI offices we've had have been punitive, small, not punitive, small. I'm sorry, have been small. In $1.6 billion budget, $3 million is the most we've spent. With 15,000 employees, 20 full-time employees is all the most we've ever had. And yet, in that same period, since I've been chancellor, African-American headcount's up 50%, Hispanic up 130%, degrees awarded up in that same time, African-American up 130%, Hispanic up 170%. So if that reverses, we've got a big problem. But it won't be reversed because of a lack of a DEI office in our particular system.
Okay, that's weird.
Senator, I think you said equality. Did you mean equality or did you mean equity? I just want to be real clear.
Equality.
So the way we see it, the way we've looked at it, at least historically, and trying to still look at it always, is really around equity, from the perspective of making sure every student has access to the specific resources that they need to be successful. And then with our support and help and their work, then they can be successful. From a perspective of equality, that we can provide all the same resources at the same level for everyone doesn't work, because we recognize a lot of our students have lots of differences from where they come from, where they're learning, their college prep and ready, and those kinds of things. So we always address it from the perspective of equity. And so I think, to answer your question, what would we do if we came to the realization that we couldn't deliver on that? We would come back and say, this is what adjustment we see that we need, or this is how we need to figure out to fix this problem. And that goes back to my comments about a system of how we operate that should be assuring equity, that every student's get access to the specific resources they need to be successful given their differences.
But let me just ask this as a follow-up. How many years should we look at this DEI repeal to make a determination as to whether or not it's doing more good than harm?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably a different answer for all of us. DEI, to my memory, started as a gradual transition from the time of the George Floyd death in May of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. So as best I remember, it kind of got started sometime in 21, 22. And so we've really only had 2-3 years to measure anything going on pre. I would say we got to have at least, for one thing, higher ed moves very slow on things. And so to see changes and to measure the right data, I think we need every 2 years, we need to be probably having a conversation to see where we are, how we're tracking. I think the chancellor brought up great data on progress that they're seeing. I think similar things like that we can report on. some of those we're measuring, some of those we're not.
Yeah, I have one other follow-up question. The agritourism program at UNT, you've halted that program there. Why is that? The agritourism program?
The sustainable tourism program that we had, a master's program, there were issues with the other entity that we were partnered with, and we are changing partners in Costa Rica for that program, and we're in the middle of moving that program.
There were other issues. What do you mean? I mean, more specific.
Academic,
Academic?
yes,
It had nothing to do with DEI.
it had nothing to do with DEI.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chancellor Williams, Chancellor Williams, I was reviewing the letter that you wrote in response to Senator Creighton on May 3rd. In your letter
Let's go. Let's go on your vote.
about the second to the last paragraph, it says, in addition, a thorough review of functions across UNT systems institutions was undertaken to identify and eliminate any office, division, or unit that could meet the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the concern that I have is that could is very broad. And one of the concerns that I have, I wanted to know, kind of like, at the end, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you want to do everything you can to support all the students and provide them what they can, well, and make them all successful, which is commendable and what we should all be doing. But there are some students who come, as you mentioned earlier, with a different set of circumstances. And I understand that you've closed your Monarch School. Is that correct? The Monarch School at UNT? Pardon me? at UT, I'm sorry, I don't know,
I say,
that's
I'm not
right.
familiar with.
I got that wrong. So the question that I have is, are there services that you had that could come under that you all have gotten rid of? And if so, what are you doing to provide the services for the students? Because my concern is that the could expands the definition of Senate bill of the DEI.
Well, I'll, if it's okay, Senator, I'll give you
Sure.
an answer, and then I'll ask
Sure.
Mr. Stuckey to give you an answer. So one thing that we didn't get really addressed is some of the resources that were saved from the efforts of the DEI work through Senate Bill 17 were shifted into some student services that provided additional support to students. So that's one thing, that's just one example of things we did.
Okay.
I
Go ahead.
assisted with drafting this letter, and the use of the word could was to emphasize the fact that we used as broad an investigation or as broad a sweep as we could in looking at all of the programs.
Yes, and my
But
concern
not-
is that potentially we have an overcompliance and that this could have a chilling effect
But we
on,
did not use as broad a stroke as we could in eliminating anything and everything that even could potentially be that.
yes,
That was a careful consideration.
yes, no, I can understand. And my understanding is that I think you are using AI to scan trainings for certain words, is that correct?
No, sir.
No? Okay,
We do have an IT program that we ran. It's not AI.
okay.
but
IT,
It's an
yeah.
IT program that picks up the key phrases. And then we worked very carefully with IT to make sure that whatever it picks up meets a clear definition of a DEI training.
And so in those words, I would assume they include inclusion, equity, diversity, so that, just because my concern is that they may be protected under federal laws. And so I think there's a concern that we could be,
We have made sure that we have protected all of the required trainings under equal opportunity, non-discrimination.
all right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. Members, any other questions? Senator Middleton?
Yeah, just to kind of mechanics of it, I appreciate y'all taking the time to wait through this morning, and it's been kind of a long day already, but on the compliance side of it, that is really important, sustainability of the compliance where you're not kind of just spot auditing and moving on, right? Is there maybe a way that you could share that with the Higher Education Coordinating Board where we can maybe develop some best practices? I know every university system is different, every campus is different, but I think that would probably be pretty helpful to come up with some best practices there. Something we missed, or something you caught, someone else didn't, or maybe make it a little easier for our higher ed to maintain compliance.
I think that having the Higher Education Coordinating Board provide guidance in this would be very helpful, actually. And I know that I know that our system, at least, would be eager to work with them in trying to develop some types of processes. And I suspect that my colleagues throughout the other institutions would also welcome that kind of guidance, because this is a challenge. And so we meet the challenge, but we want to be sure that we are doing it right. And so any guidance would be welcomed.
Members, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I think we have, sorry.
I was just going to say.
Go ahead,
Chancellor. I'm sorry, Chairman, that we would echo the same thing. We would support that. And I think through the coordinating board, it would give us some, at least minimal standardization of how we approach this.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Chancellor. Okay, we're going to move on to our final system, Texas Women's University System. Chair calls Chancellor Karine Payton and General Counsel Catherine, how do I pronounce your last name?
Antwi.
Antwi.